Okay, so welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We are going to tackle a big one today.
Yeah.
It's something that I think is on a lot of our minds.
Yeah.
And that's recession.
Mm-hmm.
What it means to be broke.
Yeah.
Just a deep dive into the economy in general.
Yeah.
And this all actually came from a listener.
Okay.
Someone who was really interested in what these terms mean, like really getting to the nitty-gritty of it.
I see.
So we found some really fascinating source material. This is from an English learning podcast.
Okay.
And they actually use a dialogue to illustrate these concepts.
Okay, so our mission
Is
to
break this down.
break it down,
Yeah.
make it clear,
Understandable. Yeah.
and really look at, recession broke.
Mm-hmm.
What are the real implications?
Yeah.
And even how these ideas are perceived around the world.
Yes. Different cultures.
Different
Well,
culture.
different perceptions. Yeah.
So we're not going to get all, textbook on
No. Keep it light. But we are going to go deep.
deep dive.
So if you want to, level up your understanding of these concepts,
This is the place to be.
stick with us.
Absolutely.
All right, so the first thing that the podcast really tackles head on is this idea of a recession. What is a recession?
Yeah, how do they define it?
According to these guys,
Well, they basically say that, a recession is a period of time when a country's economy is doing badly.
okay,
And in a recession, the country's making less money.
so less money overall,
Less money overall.
less economic activity.
How's the economic activity? Yeah, it's a slump.
Yeah, and they actually give some really specific examples
Oh, yeah, they did.
of what this looks like on the ground.
In real life, yeah.
What happens when a recession hits?
So one of the first things they mention is that many people lose their jobs.
Yeah,
Because companies might close or go bankrupt.
this is the big fear, right?
This is what we hear about all the time. Yeah.
So companies either have to let people go
Mm-hmm.
or they completely shut down, which obviously has huge ripple effects
Huge ripple effects.
for everybody involved.
Yeah.
What else did they say?
Well, they also said that people start spending less money,
Yeah.
which again makes sense.
If you lose your job
Exactly.
or you're afraid of losing your job.
Yeah, and even if you haven't lost your job,
Right.
you might be concerned about the future.
Things are tight.
Things are tight, so you're going to cut back on your spending.
You're going to hold on to your money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that, of course,
Contributes to the problem.
exactly. Yeah, it's that sort of downward spiral.
The domino effect.
What was the last thing they said?
So the last thing they mentioned had to do with the financial markets. They said that stock prices fall a lot during a recession.
Yeah.
And this is because companies are making less money
Yeah.
and investors are less confident about the future.
Less comfort about the future.
Yeah. And they even specifically said that this is what's going on right now in the U.S.
So this is why we are talking about
Yeah,
it.
because it feels very real
It's relevant. Yeah.
for a lot of us right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got recession. The next term that they tackle is
Broke.
broke.
Which seems,
Straightforward enough.
yeah, fairly simple,
Yeah,
but they do define it.
they do define it.
Just to be very clear,
Yeah.
they say broke means having no money.
No money at all.
Zero, zilch, nada.
Yeah. So that's when you were officially broke.
And they actually illustrate this right away
Yeah,
in their dialogue.
they do. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the scenario that they set up.
Okay, so we have this guy named Charlie,
Go.
and he's going to see this guy called Mr. Corleone,
Okay.
who needs no introduction, right?
Right.
We all know who Mr. Corleone is.
Yeah.
And so Charlie goes to see him, and he says, "I'm really, really sorry to trouble you, but I need your help."
Okay.
And then later on, he explains that this recession has hit him pretty hard.
Okay.
He's lost his job,
All right.
and he's in a lot of debt. So this is a real world
Real world consequence.
consequence of a recession.
Exactly.
Okay, what kind of debt is he talking about?
Well, he mentions several things that a lot of us can probably relate to.
Okay.
He says credit card bills, car payments, I've got to pay my mortgage, and on top of all that, I have to pay my son's college tuition.
So these are big ticket items
Huge, yeah.
that
Yeah.
a lot of us have to deal with.
Yeah, if not all of them, at least some of them.
Right.
So yeah, this is what's weighing him down.
And this is where I think the dialogue gets kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a twist.
There's this twist.
Because Charlie asks Mr. Corleone for a loan,
Okay.
right? So he's asking the mob boss for a loan.
That makes sense.
And Mr. Corleone's response is pretty unexpected.
What does he say?
He's like, what at a time like this? I'm broke too,
Haha.
You're not the only one who's been hit by this recession.
Oh, wow.
I lost half my money in the stock market crash.
So even the mob
Even the mob is feeling it.
is feeling the pinch.
Yeah, the podcast actually points this out.
They do.
They say it's a bad recession when even the mob runs out of money,
Yeah.
which I thought was a funny line.
I mean, it is kind of funny.
Yeah, in a dark way.
Yeah.
But it really highlights how widespread the impact is.
Yeah.
This isn't just affecting, the average person on the street.
Right.
It's affecting everyone.
And even the people you think might be immune.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so we've got this concept of a loan, which they actually define as well.
Yeah, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, what is a loan?
So they say a loan is when you borrow money,
Borrow money. Okay.
and they're careful to distinguish it from the word alone,
Right.
which means being by yourself.
Right.
So a loan is when you get money from someone else.
With the promise to pay it back.
Yeah, usually with a little extra added on top.
Interest.
Interest, exactly.
Okay.
So that's a loan.
And then we have this idea of a mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
which Charlie mentions. He's got to pay his mortgage.
Yep.
So what is a mortgage?
Well, they explain that a mortgage is basically a type of loan.
Okay.
It's a loan specifically for buying a house or a property.
Okay, so it's a loan to buy real estate.
Exactly.
Okay. And they also give us a little spelling tip,
They do, yeah.
which is
They point out that there's a silent T in mortgage.
silent T.
It's spelled M-O-R-T-G-A-G-E.
But it's pronounced mortgage.
Yeah, G-G, exactly.
Easy to mispronounce.
Very easy, yeah.
All right, so another interesting phrase that comes up
Mm-hmm.
is Charlie says, the recession has hit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
What does that phrase actually convey?
Hit me pretty hard.
Well, they explain that it means that something had a strong negative effect on you.
A strong negative effect.
Yep, so it could be anything.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a recession.
Like, to give a few examples.
Give us an example.
Like, my divorce hit me pretty hard. I'm so depressed.
Okay.
Or, this cold has hit me pretty hard. I've been in bed for a week.
The news of Fluffy's death hit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
I've been crying for days.
Oh no, poor Fluffy.
So you can see that it can be physical, emotional, financial,
Any kind of negative impact.
any kind of negative impact.
It's a very versatile phrase.
Very versatile, yeah.
Okay, so in Charlie's case, obviously the recession hitting him hard
Yeah.
means losing his job.
Financial struggles, yeah,
All the debt.
exactly.
Now, he also mentions tuition.
Mhm.
He's got to pay his son's college tuition.
Yep.
What is tuition?
So they define tuition as the money you have to pay to your school so that you can study there.
Okay.
And they point out that this is usually for college or university.
Okay.
Although in some countries you might have to pay tuition for primary or secondary school as well.
Right.
But yeah, basically it's the cost of getting an education
At an institute.
at an institution. Yep.
All right, so we've covered the basics.
Yeah.
Recession, broke
Yeah.
loans, mortgages,
Tuition.
all of that.
Yeah.
But then they go into something I think really interesting.
Yeah, they talk about cultural perspectives
Yes.
on debt.
Different cultures.
Different parts of the world.
Yeah, view this whole idea of being in debt
In very different ways.
very differently.
Yeah.
So what are some of the cultures that they highlighted?
So they mainly talked about North America,
Okay.
specifically the US and Canada
Okay.
and Europe.
Okay.
And they use Switzerland as a specific example.
Okay, so North America versus Europe.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, what's the difference?
Well, in North America, they say that being in debt is a really common thing.
Really common.
Really common. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, they even go so far as to say that it's almost good to be in debt.
Good to be in debt.
Yeah, or even necessary to be in debt.
That's interesting.
Yeah, why would that be?
Why would it be good to be in debt?
Well, they explain that it's all about building a credit history.
A credit history, okay.
So basically, unless you have a history of being in debt and regularly paying off your debts,
Mhm.
you can't actually borrow money. So if you want to buy a house
Yeah?
or a car,
You need to have been in debt before.
you need to show that you can handle debt responsibly.
Okay.
And they even mention that banks will offer credit cards to university students,
Wow.
sometimes with like incentives
To get you in
to get you started on that credit history
early.
early.
Yeah. So it's almost like
It gets built into
okay.
the system.
part of the system
Yeah.
to be in debt.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then they contract that with Europe,
Yeah.
using Switzerland as an example.
Okay, so what's the view in Switzerland?
Well, they say that in Switzerland, they're really careful with debt.
Careful with debt.
Yeah, and it's generally seen as a bad thing to be in debt,
Oh, wow. So the complete opposite.
pretty much.
Okay.
And they give this example with credit cards.
Okay.
So if you want a credit card with a limit of, let's say, 500 Swiss francs,
Okay.
you might have to deposit 700 francs in your bank account
Wow.
as collateral.
So you have to basically
You have to prove that you have the money.
Front the money.
Yeah, before you can even borrow it.
Wow, that's so different
Very different. Yeah.
than the North American system.
It really shows you how different cultures
Yeah.
view this whole concept of debt.
View it and manage it.
Exactly.
And I think for you listening,
Yeah.
this might resonate depending on,
Where you're from,
where you're from,
your background.
what your experience has been.
Exactly.
But it just shows you how varied
Mhm.
these approaches can be.
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on
Yeah.
is they also talk about some fluency builders.
Oh, yeah, they have a section on that.
Which are little phrases that can help English learners
Yeah.
sound more
Natural, a native speaker.
Yeah. So what were some of the phrases that they highlighted?
So they had 3 that they really focused on.
Okay.
The first one was, what can I do for you?
Okay. What can I do for you?
Yeah. Which they explain as a really polite and natural way of saying, can I help you?
Okay, so it's a way to offer assistance.
Yeah, a nice way to offer assistance.
Okay, what was the second one?
The second one was, I'm really sorry to trouble you.
I'm really sorry to trouble you.
Which is a way to apologize when you need to ask someone for something.
Okay.
And, you might be bothering them.
Right.
So they give examples like needing someone to sign a form,
Okay.
or asking to leave work early,
Right.
or even just borrowing a pen.
Yeah.
So these are all situations where you might use that phrase.
Sorry to trouble you, but
Exactly.
okay. And the last one?
The last one was on top of all that,
Oh, on top of all that.
which basically means and also.
And also
Yeah, but it kind of emphasizes that there's more bad news coming
more bad news.
or more good news.
Okay, so it could be either.
Yeah, they actually give an example.
Give us an example.
They say, imagine you lose your job,
Okay.
your car gets stolen, and your girlfriend breaks up with you. That's a bad day.
That's a bad day.
And then they contrast that with a good day,
Okay.
where it's your birthday, all your friends come to your party, and you get lots of presents.
Okay.
And you could say, on top of all that,
I also got a promotion.
I also got a promotion.
Yeah.
So it works in both situations.
Positive or negative.
Exactly.
A very versatile phrase.
Very versatile. Yeah.
All right, so if you're learning English,
Take note.
these are good phrases.
Yeah, try to use them.
To level up your fluency.
Yeah, and sound more natural.
All right, so to sum it all up, we've gone deep
Deep dive.
into recession, which is basically an economic downturn,
Yeah.
where, a country's financial activity is declining,
Making less money.
making less money,
Yeah.
and then broke,
Which is simply having no money,
no money,
zero
just
bulge.
nada. And we looked at all this through this dialogue,
Yeah.
this very relatable dialogue.
About Charlie and Mr. Corleone.
Hey, Mr. Corleone, yeah, who are both struggling
In their own ways.
in their own ways, yeah.
Yeah.
And we looked at specific types of debt,
Mortgages, loans, tuition.
credit cards, car payments.
Yeah. All the things that weigh us.
You know what happens to a society that normalizes debt versus one that is afraid of it?
Interesting, yeah.
What are the economic implications?
Yeah, it was a social implication.
The social implications.
Yeah.
And then thinking about recessions, we know they happen.
They're cyclical.
They're cyclical. How can we use that knowledge
Yeah.
to make better financial decisions?
Prepare ourselves.
Yeah, in our own lives.
Yeah.
So lots to think about.
That
Yeah,
brief-
hopefully this deep dive
Yeah.
has given you some tools,
Some food for thought.
some food for thought
Yeah.
to navigate these challenging times.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us,
Yeah, thanks for listening.
and keep diving
Keep exploring.
into these important topics.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.